Hello guys and welcome to another video. My name is Mark, I'm an entrepreneur and property investor. In today's video we're talking about how buying stupid things can stop you becoming rich. But furthermore, I'm going to show you some of the stupid things I've bought that have really impeded my journey, and also some of the great things that I've done in the past and how that's helped me along the way. Now before we get into the video, give it a big like, as always, helps me out with the algorithm. Subscribe if you haven't, and remember, until I get to 10,000 subscribers, you can book a free one-to-one call with me. Click the link in the description, fill out a form, we can connect via Zoom, and it's absolutely free of charge, and we can talk about whatever it is that's on your mind. But we're going to get into the video nice and quick today because we're going to attack the top 4 or 5 biggest expenses that people have. And the first one we're going to attack is the largest one, which is the home. Now this I categorize into several different baskets because people have different requirements. If you're just starting out and you're maybe 18 to 25, then your requirement's very different to myself as a 42-year-old man with 4 children. So we're going to have to look at this across a broad spectrum of both economic capabilities and lifestyle requirements. So we're going to look at it first of all for people who are just starting out. Now my first home that I bought was when I was about 30, well 29. Until that I rented rooms in shared accommodation in London. I was working in London, so it's quite hard to afford a flat. I rented a HMO room. Now for me that actually worked out really well because it meant I was able to start businesses, it meant I was able to allocate capital to other things, and I was able to really start building my investment philosophy from keeping those expenses nice and low with my accommodation from day one. Now when we did buy our first home, this is one of the smartest things I did. I bought the first home and I bought a 3-bed in an area where I might not want it to live, when I could have bought a 1-bedroom maybe closer into central London. I bought a 3-bedroom over in Erith, which is in zone 4 or 5, something like that. I've still got it today in Durrian Way. But I rented out the 2 rooms. And what that really did was I was renting a room in Crystal Palace at the time for about £500 a month, and my mortgage payment was going to be about £650. I rented out 2 rooms for £450, £500 each, and suddenly I wasn't paying any mortgage, I wasn't paying any bills, I had a lot of more disposable income. And I was able to put a small deposit down, and I was able to benefit from capital appreciation. And that same house that I bought for £176,000 back then is now worth about £425,000. So you can see how that one move, A, managed to minimize my expenses, B, allowed me to benefit from capital appreciation, and C, meant that I had the flexibility that when I moved on from there, I was able to rent the house out as a whole. Now, I think for the majority of people who are just getting on the housing ladder, that is probably the best aim you can do. Using the low deposit, being able to rent out spare rooms, all of those things are great leverages for you to start to build wealth. Now, if you didn't want to go down that route, I would always recommend renting where you live. And for a long time now, about 5-6 years, I've rented where I live. And I'm going to give you 3 or 4 main reasons why I think that's a big advantage. Number 1, it takes away the large capital requirement to buy a home. So for example, my last house, Hillview, I would have needed to put down a 20% deposit on a £2 million house. Well, 2.2 million it was. So I would have had to put down now 425k. My mortgage payments would have been about 8k a month. And then the bills and the upkeep and everything else make that 10 easily. Instead, I rented it, £4,500 a month. I didn't have to put down the 400k, I only had to put 4.5k down. That 400k of capital could go to work elsewhere, paying me money. So for most people, I think renting where you live is actually a big, big benefit. Now, I do accept for some people that level of security that they want, especially if they have a family, and I have a family, and I'm currently over in Dubai, and guess what? This place is rented. I wouldn't buy, I would only rent where I live now, because for me, it gives me more flexibility. So the biggest expense that most of us face is housing. And I think when you're young and able to reduce that cost, renting a room is a great way. I think as you're approaching maybe married life, having a partner, something like that, buying a house and renting out the spare rooms, you don't really affect your lifestyle that much because you got used to living with other people, but you do affect your wealth massively. And then the next step on from that would be if you had a family and you were looking to purchase a home, well, renting that home and buying some buy-to-lets makes much more sense, especially with larger houses. The rental returns on large properties are terrible. which is why most buy-to-let investors are buying 2, 3-bedroom houses, because those are the ones that give the best rental returns. They're not buying big mansions and putting it all in there, because the big mansions and the big properties, they have terrible rental returns. So if you can take advantage of great rental returns on smaller properties and then rent with the money you're getting these larger properties, take away the responsibility of the upkeep, take away the responsibility of remodeling it, all of those great benefits of only renting, then you get a win-win on both sides of the equation. So regardless of your position in life, I think that is the first part of your equation that you could look at. And I've had some people that I've worked with in the past where they've maybe got £300,000, £400,000 in their primary residence, and they're still paying £4,000 a month in mortgage payments on an £800,000 house, something like that. It's crazy. You could take that £400,000, make 5, 6, 700 grand a month and rent the property for £3,000. Like, you would be far wealthier doing it that way. And you would take away all the requirement for having the maintenance. Most people are better off living that way. So let's get on to the second largest expense for most people, which is going to be your car. And don't worry, I'm going to show you my car and exactly how I've wasted money. But I'll tell you one thing, I did this quite well back in the day. So when I moved from Erith, which is the property I was talking about earlier, down to Oxfordshire to join my friend in building the taxi business, I bought the second house and we rented out the first one. Now, we refinanced the first one, and at this point it had gone up by about 100k or so. So we were able to release about 80,000, something like that. We were able to buy our property over in Oxfordshire, which would later become a HMO, and I had some money left over. Now, with that money, my wife desperately wanted a new car. She was driving a 2005 X3 at the time, and she really needed more space, more seats. We had some children, and the reality was that car was starting to fall apart. Now, we could have taken the excess money and bought that car, but what we did instead was we bought our first HMO. And this really did change our philosophy when it came to buying assets to pay for liabilities. And we really did start to adopt that as a way of life. So what I'm really talking about here is our third property, our first HMO in Didcot. Now, we paid £350,000 for that, a mixture of savings and this refinance I'm talking about. And that generated a free cash flow of about £1,800 a month. Well, guess what car you can get with that? About anything you want. So we could have taken the money, the £70,000, £80,000 that was left over, and we could have bought an SQ7. Instead, what we did was we bought the property, and then we used the money that came back from that to get a PCP agreement on an SQ7, which was a fantastic car for the rest of our time in the UK. Now I'm over in Dubai, I actually don't have access to the same level of finance that I do in the UK. The banks, because I've only been here a short space of time, won't lend me on a PCP agreement. Instead, what I've chosen to do is buy an older vehicle for cash. I've got myself a Porsche Panamera. In fact, let's go and see it. Let's go outside right now and have a look. And I can tell you what a massive waste of money, but at the same time, how much fun this car actually is. So there she is. Porsche Panamera Turbo. And if I was to rent that car or to lease that car, it would cost me somewhere around the region of, I think, about £1,200, £1,500 a month. Instead, I bought an older one. It was 16 grand. I spent about another 5, 6 fixing her up. New air suspension, a few other bits and bobs, and now it runs sweet as you like. And it's still a 3.5 second car, so lots of fun. But what I would say to you is I wouldn't have done that if I had access to finance out here. No, I would have taken the money that I had, I'd have used it as a deposit on an asset, and then I'd have used that income in order to pay the lease payment or the PCP payment on the vehicle. So firstly, the amount of capital that I had didn't make any sense to do a lease on a nice fast car like that, because it only only doing really brand new vehicles, and it's going to be £1,500, £2,000 a month. So by the time I paid that, we're talking about 10 lease payments and my 20 grand, I might as well have bought it. And for a lot of people, it makes sense to buy a cheaper, older vehicle, run it for a few years. I don't do a lot of miles, to be honest. So for me, it makes more sense to run it that way. But what I did do when I moved down to Oxfordshire, as I said, I was building a taxi company. I sold my car, which I owned at that point. And remember, my philosophy hadn't really developed at that point in time. And I bought 3 Mercedes on finance for the business. And with that money and with those assets, we were able to build the business quicker. And at the same time, I still had access to a car. Now, I didn't have any time for any pleasure when it came to building the business. I was working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. It was very, very hectic. But what I'm saying to most people is before you buy that car, and if you've bought a car, a 50, 60 grand car outright, consider selling it, getting your 50 grand, using that 50 grand to buy an asset. You could buy a £200,000 house with that, which is going to pay you on net about £500 to £600 a month if you just did a single straight buy to let. Now with that £500-600 a month, go out and lease yourself a vehicle. Go out and do a PCP agreement on a vehicle. And with that, you've got the advantage of your appreciating asset working on one side and your depreciating asset you're paying off over time. For most people, that will make them significantly more wealthy. Now let's get on to number 3. We've done cars. The third one is discretionary spending. And I'm going to give a great example of this. And again, as Jim Rohn said, listen carefully, but don't look too closely. I mean, we're all trying on this. When I moved into this villa, we have, and I'll show you again, we had a very small space outside, and I wanted to put something in that. So I ended up buying myself a hot tub, like you do in a hot country. So that was some discretionary spending that just happened. I had to kit out the living room, so I bought a large TV, again, something that just happened. I like playing the piano, so I bought a new piano. Again, something that happened. But what I would say is, again, for most people, and something that I've done very well in the past, is use that investment income to purchase these sort of things. They're all going to zero. That TV's worthless today. You know, ultimately, all of these accessories, all of these gadgets, all of the things that we buy that are discretionary, the hot tubs, they are all depreciating like hell. Buy an appreciating asset that pays you revenue and then use that income to buy these sort of things. And in the UK, we've got such access to finance with interest-free credit on things like sofas and TVs. You might as well save up that money, buy the asset, and then use the income from that asset in order to pay for these sort of things. So that would be my third tip. And again, in the UK, something that I did very, very well. Now, if I look at my journey and I think about it, I made 2 or 3 large mistakes, which I want to help you avoid. First of all, I bought the second house, I didn't rent it. I could have, instead of putting, and I think we put about £80,000 into the second one, and then £80,000 into the buy-to-let, the HMO, I could have essentially bought far more property with my money if I weren't buying that second residence and I just rented it. So that was my first mistake, and I think that's probably cost me about £1 million over the last 9 years, something like that, because of the leverage and the amount of growth that there has been over the last 9 years in property. I'd have been able to refinance, buy more, refinance, buy more. So that's a quite expensive mistake. Beyond that though, I look back on my financial life and the only other mistake I can really think of is I didn't start sooner. I've been pretty good with using my investment income as my spending money. I've been pretty good at cutting my expenses and making sure that I live within my means, whatever those means might be at that time. And a good example is right now, my property portfolio, you know, it used to clear 10, 12 grand a month in profit. Right now it's about 2 because of these high interest rates. But as those interest rates come down, my profit will go up. And as those interest rates have gone up, my spending has come down. Instead of flying business class places, I'll fly economy. You know, there's easy ways to make sure that you can cut those expenses. So guys, that's my video on how buying silly things can really affect your wealth. What do you think? Put it down in the comments. I reply to every single one, and I will see you on the next video. Cheers, guys.